We're going to look at winning the game, which is leveraging Contextual Bandits for creative optimization, with the wonderful Joseph Iris from Personally. Woo!
Check. So first I want to thank everyone for drinking responsibly yesterday. Seems like everyone else doesn't care about creative selection as much as you guys, so I appreciate it. I'm Joseph. I'm the Director of Machine Learning Products at Personally. We're a programmatic DSP providing UA and retargeting services based in Israel. And yeah, here's my clicker. We're going to talk about creative selection. I'm going to try and give you a lay of the land of how machine learning is used to make that happen, where in platforms that actually can do these things that are more impressive than A/B testing, show you what goes into it, the major tool we're using and we believe most of the industry is, which is called Bandits. It's a type of algorithm from the subsection of machine learning called reinforcement learning. I'll get into that, and we'll talk about the future of when they're taking an additional identifier away from us, and we still need to optimize campaigns on Android with the privacy sandbox. A/B tests are obviously a necessary evil in any industry. Ours is no exception. When you don't control the buying fully, when you're using a separate platform, you have to make all sorts of workarounds in order to make your tests work, because there's another algorithm in your way. It takes time, resources, and ideally, you'd want to have a better method overall. The list is longer. Obviously, it's again a necessary evil, but with machine learning, we can do other things than just generate stuff like everyone's usually talking about for creatives. We can select them better. When you're approaching designing a system that does this better using machine learning, you need to consider what the UA manager cares about, obviously performance, but you want to make sure that each and every creative they generated, because obviously work hours go into that, is tested. And one thing that is a major pain point is fatigue, so you want to play around that. That's like a confusing point in this, because sometimes you have these evergreens that just last forever and you can't explain them. So you have to sometimes force the machine to not get rid of some variations. And it's a question of risk and reward, right? You want to check everything, but you don't want to spend too much money doing that. Bandits appear to be the ideal solution for that, because they take that into account and they try to minimize your exploration and allow you to exploit as much as possible according to your goals. So bandits come from the term one-arm bandit, which is a weird nickname for slot machines, and from the theoretical question of which slot machine should you use on the casino floor in order to maximize your reward. Obviously, you can't know that, and it's manipulated in many different ways, but they play around with these things, being scientists. It allows you to test as many variations as you want. As you can see, like the octopus, the idea is like having basically as many arms as you want. And it's unbiased, which is much more important than any other. I don't know about any other advantage here, but that's critical. People get married to the creatives they generate together with their creative team, and sometimes it just doesn't work. You don't want to force it. Another very important thing is the regret cost associated with running 2 or more variations, that some of them are bad and not the champion ones. Using classic A/B testing, you have a pretty long period of time, as we can see in the first chart here, where you're giving everything equal parts of your traffic, even though they're not necessarily performing the best one. When you're using bandits, think of it as real-time A/B testing with all the metrics available in memory. That's the difficult part about implementing it, because you need to hold up a lot of information in memory and serve it very quickly. And we're already limited in programmatic, where we have like 200 milliseconds to bid. But in order to enjoy your exploration from the first positive sample, you want to use it directly. So as you can see in the second chart, very quickly, the green variation starts getting more and more traffic. The other ones get eliminated over time. The third example here is another layer of bandits that we've implemented recently, which feels kind of like the end game of this thing, where instead of having a single champion for an entire campaign or campaign group, depending on how you build your system, you'll have one for different audience cohorts based on a bunch of features. I'll get into that later. The great thing about this is that you can constantly add new variations inside. Obviously, the studios we work with generate a lot of them, some on a weekly basis. They want to test crazy stuff. They want to make sure they test them quickly and get insights quickly. And we help a lot of our partners with those tests. I'm going to show you 3 different approaches that play around with this like explore concept and how they work briefly. So we have funny gifs that help you understand the concept. Here we have a greedy, that's a hamster? Yeah. Basically, the hamster found out that the carrot is the best creative variation. That allegory doesn't exactly work, but he learns that pretty quickly. He just keeps exploiting it. So you'll have a smaller and smaller percentage of your budget or your impressions going towards the non-champion, and you're going to be very exploitative. Like the danger here is that you might land on a local optimum, meaning you have a creative that was better initially, but it wasn't statistical, and you'll keep putting all your eggs in that basket, so that's not ideal. We do use it for the start of campaigns where we really need to get some install going more than anything else. The 2 other methods, Thompson sampling is the next one. They divide the traffic according to the performance in relation to the other creatives. So if we have one creative outperforming everything, it's going to get, let's say, 90% of the pie. The other ones are going to get distributed according to their performance. A nice thing about this one is when you get a new arm, it aggressively samples it because it doesn't know how it looks like. It doesn't know its performance, it doesn't know its reward, so it samples it very quickly, and this way you can get insights pretty quickly and see if we have actual new champions. The last one is quite similar. It just uses different math. Like the Thompson sampling approach is more probabilistic. The upper confidence bound is more grounded in rules depending on like the size of the data set and everything. But basically, it tries to minimize exploration on new arms, but still make sure they reach this confidence bound that tells you, okay, I know enough about them in order to see where they stack up against the rest. We employ all of these in different types of campaigns, depending on the lifetime of the campaign and like the app we're promoting in general. So here's like a quick example of how Thompson sampling looks like. As I said, the champion would get 90%, the rest would get like distributed according to the ranking in IPM if it's for videos. The problem is that inside this single group you're targeting, there are different personas, different cohorts, even when it's not with device IDs, and it's just different contexts in the apps they're coming from, so you're suboptimal when you're doing this. I'll get into contextual bandits and how they work next. The idea is to use the same algorithms and just add another layer of data that is considered as part of this selection. So basically, all the features that we use in our classification for installs or for post-install events, we use them in the creative selection as well. So these are things around the other predictions that we have, the probability of install, the probability of in-app purchases, features about the creative that we extract, objects that appear inside it, its length, its format, as well as the publisher. So if someone is in a context that's similar to your game, if, for example, you're promoting a match-free game, you want to treat them one way. If they're playing something completely different or reading the news, you want to treat it differently. It's just a different mindset, even if it's the same person. Other things we do with machine learning to improve our creative selection and maximize what we can is, as I said earlier, we enrich the feature set for the creative selection data sets with actual objects from inside the ads. So if it's static, it's pretty easy to get the objects. If it's a video, we have like OpenCV, which is like a library that enables you to split it into frames and then extract the things. So if there's a sword in it and stuff like that. We don't rely on categories. I said it a lot of times before, we can't. So because of ASO and switching categories for fun. So we extract the store texts, and this way with vectorizing them, we have an embedding that represents each app, and we can check the contextual relationship between two apps. So we'll have like different ranges, and those are also another part of our features. And for the future, again, on the privacy sandbox, we're going to have topics, and we use those to represent like where the users are coming from. Some of the topics they're providing are going to be very in-depth, so this can become pretty close to user representation, but obviously much more privacy-oriented. This is just to highlight how the image extraction works. We find the objects that we know are meaningful, and we enrich it. It's pretty useful. Like the bump we got from this for relevant titles where some objects or some I don't know, items are important, like mid-core RPGs, it was significant. I want to show you a couple of case studies that highlight how this works. So one of our biggest partners is retargeting is Papaya. We work very closely with them. And when it comes to real money gaming, there's a lot that goes into the user's recency and frequency, like how heavily he uses the app, and not necessarily just how much money he deposits, but when he last deposited, if he deposited a lot lately, et cetera, et cetera. So for these kind of apps that are heavily affected by this like user behavior, we create a time series analysis to represent where the user is in terms of his usual behavior. And it effectively splits them into several groups, and for each one we selected different creatives. And what you can see here is that's the feedback we get from our clients a lot for retargeting, is that we get significantly lower cost per reactivation while meeting the, in this case, very aggressive KPIs, because it's RMG, they're very aggressive. Another example is from Alien Invasion Idol that was recently purchased by Crazy Labs. In this case, there are mechanics we want to express inside the creative selection. And different mechanics appeal to different users. And this isn't like the way we designed it, it's just kind of how it landed automatically. We feed the machine, these are the different creatives, these are the categories the users are coming from, and this is kind of what came out. You can see this for the hyper-casual audience, they get a simple mechanic. For the idle and RPG core, they get actual highlights that are pretty similar to what's happening in the game. It was really nice to see this happening because, again, it's not done deliberately, it's just what the model learned. And same here, we recouped within 3 months, and yeah. The future, privacy, you can't get away of, of this subject in any, literally any session you do. But we've tried already to simulate how that reality is going to look like on Android. On iOS, we already have the store description stuff, and it's working pretty well. But here we basically have topics that are going to be, as I said, pretty representative. And you still have some way to distinguish between users, even though you don't know the device graph. The device features, if it's the strongest device, the most expensive device, it's also a huge part of it. But other things let you know, like the state of mind they're in. If someone's playing a mid-core RPG at 4 a.m., it's different from someone playing a mid-core RPG at 8 p.m. on a Sunday. So giving this to your model can still give you some distinction and improve your creative selection. We did some tests retroactively because it's not exactly still available. And we tied topics to categories as much as we could. And we saw this distinction happening in a pretty similar manner to the way it does on device IDs. We couldn't fully test it yet, but it seems to cover 60% of what you would get normally. We still need to see how it's going to look like, but as usual, the same way we saw with Scan, as soon as the signal decreases, the prices decrease, so everything balances out. So we're not too worried about it. A couple practical tips for working with these sort of platforms that run these tests. So obviously all the closed gardens run this in one way or another. you're not necessarily going to have much control over it unless you're really close to them. But when it comes to DSPs, I think it's good to first ask what sort of thing they're using, what they're doing with new arms or creatives when they need to explore them, just to try and make sure that your things don't get exhausted too quickly. At the beginning, I do recommend to provide as many variations as possible. These algorithms can handle it, and they'll find like the champion that suits their traffic. If they're buying in-app, in games, it's gonna figure itself out pretty quickly. You want to add new ones progressively and not in bulk, because at that point you already have established the IPMs or the CTRs for everything. You don't want to disturb it too much. And please don't kill your champions, even if you really want to. It can mess things up. You just want to avoid it. And that's it. Thank you. Questions? If anyone has questions, feel free. Yeah.
Hello? Yeah. Nice presentation, thanks.
Thank you.
I've used Bandits in the past for incentives in ride-hailing because it's very challenging to find for each driver the right incentive. You're tagging the frames in the creative videos.
Yeah.
Are you doing any meta classification of the whole, like a story classification?
No.
No.
Too hard, honestly.
Yeah.
We're sticking to what we can do with open source stuff right now.
Yeah.
We delved into manually tagging like the sentiment as much as we can.
Yeah.
It wasn't ever scalable, and whenever we tried to do it with mechanical Turks, it failed miserably. You see that the feedback you get from people is mixed, even when it's so obvious. Even when you have those like mobile ads that are obviously appealing to your human emotion, of like, the ones where the window is broken and you need to fix it, so you're supposed to be sad. You just don't get the feedback you'd expect. I guess that's the end game, but we're gonna have to wait for Gen AI to be able to detect emotion. At that point, we should probably be scared from Gen AI anyway, right?
Yeah, I mean, but you could do a second level model, right? You have all the tags of the frames, and then you have to build a story. I used to work for a TV company. We wanted to do this, but then I left, so I was hoping you had done it. So.
Not yet. It definitely went on the drawing board, but didn't really pass testing. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Sure, thanks.
Hi, and good morning, and thank you for the presentation.
Thank you.
I have one question, because you also presented and also showed like it's great to optimize creative towards different audiences, but how do you ensure then also that your algorithm is not optimizing towards to have an average best creative for all audiences, but really optimizes towards the different audiences? Because like you showed, that the champion is not the average champion for all audiences, but you have really a creative tailored.
So it depends on how confident we are about the user's classification. If this is a user where, again, when it comes to device craft stuff where we actually have more information, we know if this is someone we touched in the past and we can affect in one way, and we can classify him as, let's say, as a mid-core player, right? In this case, he's going to get the champion that's relevant for that. In other cases, when we're not sure, you do get just the average best one. It's just the way you set it up. The thing is, this goes hand in hand with the overall classification. And there's also rotation between the creatives naturally, at least on our DSP, that the same person won't see the same creatives 2 times in a row. So we're using, we're spending millions of dollars, on these campaigns. We're trying to utilize any cent we spent to get as much signal as possible. So obviously, when we're exploring a new audience deliberately, or if it happens just, implicitly, the machine considers that. So it always goes hand in hand with the classification. So it's kind of hard to separate it, but I have to do it for these sessions. Thanks. Thank you. Thank you very much.